What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It is time to give you my updated college football top 25 rankings as we head into week 11 of the 2024 college football season. The month of November is now officially underway. We got the first college football playoff top 25 rankings coming out tomorrow night. Looking forward to those rankings. My top 25 doesn't really matter the rest of the way, but we usually do this top 25 week by week, and we're not going to stop doing them. And, this top 25, of course, is based off of resume and how the teams have really performed this year. And also, who do I think would beat on a neutral field? But I haven't really based it off a neutral field, so I'm really, just basing this off mostly of resume and then also how the teams have been performing this year. But yeah, the first playoff rankings will be coming out tomorrow night. That's going to be very interesting to watch, and we already saw a lot of chaos in the first weekend of the month of November. So I did make quite a few changes here to my top 25 for this week. Let's go ahead and get right into these updated top 25 rankings as I show you my changes here from this past weekend to this week. And we'll start from the bottom and work our way to the top. So we'll begin here with 21 through 25. So I got Pittsburgh at number 25, Army at number 24, Ole Miss at number 23, Louisville at number 22, and then Colorado comes in at number 21. So Pittsburgh, we'll start with them first. A very tough game against SMU. They got blown out in this game. I think that game really told us that Pittsburgh maybe is not for real. But, Pittsburgh, they're a pretty good team. They've had a really good season. They're sitting there at 7-1. A lot of the people in the offseason thought Pittsburgh was going to be one of the worst teams in the ACC. I did not. If you go back to my preseason prediction, I did have this team getting to 6 wins. I think I had them going 6-6 or 7-5. They're usually right there around 6, 7, 8 wins, somewhere in that range, because this is one of the more consistent teams in the ACC, but they've been more than consistent. They've been a really good team this year, so I'm not going to penalize them after that loss to SMU. Is a pretty good loss to a really good SMU team, so that really is enough to put them on their resume here to still be at number 25. But yeah, Pittsburgh, very tough loss for them, their first loss of the season. They were one out of those 3 teams to go down this weekend that were undefeated. Army at number 24, the Black Knights come in. They're undefeated still, but, not a really good game against Air Force, to be honest. I know the score was only 20-3 and all, but, Army still kind of won big, by 17, but it wasn't one of those dominating Army wins that we've seen, of course, throughout the entire season. Now, don't get me wrong, Army did have not their quarterback in this game. That he was out with the injury, so maybe that's the reason why Army's offense was just not really as explosive in this game like how the other previous games have gone. You look at Army's schedule the rest of the way, they got 3 games, that are probably going to be winnable for them. You got the Navy game still. Navy's looking like a pretty winnable game for Army because that game, Navy's now 6-2. They've lost 2 games in a row, so it's not looking like a really good Army and Navy matchup pretty well, but you got Notre Dame coming up in a couple weeks. That's going to be a very tough game for the Black Knights. So we could see a 2-loss Navy versus a 1-loss Army team. That Army and Navy game is still going to be really exciting to watch. But I got the Black Knights here at number 24. Ole Miss at number 23. They took care of business on the road at Arkansas, scoring 63 points. This offense very explosive going into the month of November. They have a tough test coming up against Georgia this weekend. If they can pull off some sort of upset there, Ole Miss has got a chance here to make the playoff, but I think based on their resume, they're probably not going to, the committee's not going to let them probably into the playoff just because of their resume. They do have the loss to LSU, which is a really good loss for them, but they don't really have that quality win on their resume. Yeah, they got the couple of losses. The Kentucky game probably will hurt their resume because now Kentucky is now 3-6 on the year. So yeah, Kentucky's not been pretty good, and that Ole Miss, loss for them, that's not looking really like a good loss for the Rebels, but we're here to talk about their game from this past weekend. They beat Arkansas pretty big, so that's it's pretty much enough for me to Ole Miss to keep them in the rankings. And then Louisville comes in at number 22. So I know a lot of people are going to say, why is a 6-3 Louisville team ahead of these other 3 teams here at the 21 through 25 range? Well, it's because of Louisville's resume. They got really good wins, and how about their win over Clemson this past weekend? That's their biggest win of the season. They went on the road and beat Clemson in Death Valley. Who saw this coming? Louisville was like a 14 point underdog, I believe, and they went out there and beat them like 33-22. So 33-21 maybe was the final score if I can't remember correctly. So they probably beat them by over 10 points. So yeah, this Louisville team, I was really impressed with their defense. The offense looked really good as well. And Louisville looks like they could be not even a playoff contender, but they can still probably be alive in this ACC race. And you just look at their resume. Their 3 losses come to really good teams. First off, he got the loss to Notre Dame back in the month of September. Same thing with SMU. They're 8-1. Notre Dame's 7-1. And then you got the loss to Miami, who is undefeated and also in my top 5. So I do spoil it there. Miami's in my top 5 for this week. Yeah, Louisville's got a great resume. They have a much more better resume than Ole Miss, Army, and Pittsburgh. So that's why you're seeing a 3-loss Louisville team right here in this top 25 for this week, is because of their resume. And with the win over Clemson, that's really enough for me to put them here at number 22. And then Colorado at number 21, they had a bye week, so not really much to talk about. The Buffaloes, they are bowl eligible, but they're also kind of still alive in the Big 12 race. You know, they only got 1 conference loss. They do have a pretty good loss to Kansas State. You know, that game, of course, is still looking like a pretty solid loss, even though the Wildcats lost over the weekend. But yeah, Colorado here sitting at number 21. These are my rankings here from 21 through 25. Let's now go from 16 through 20. I got Missouri at number 20, Iowa State at number 19, Kansas State at number 18, Washington State at 17, and then Boise State comes in at 16. So Missouri, they also had a bye week, so not much to talk about. The Missouri Tigers, they have a couple of losses to some really good teams. They had the loss to Texas A&M. And they also had the loss to Alabama. So a couple of really good losses for Missouri. They still have the win over Vanderbilt. You know, that's looking like a really good win for Missouri now, because Vanderbilt, they are 6-3. I mean, I don't really think anybody saw, you know, Vanderbilt getting to a bowl game this year and being 6-3 here in the month of November. What a great season for Vanderbilt. They just beat Auburn on the road at Jordan-Hare, 17-7. So Vanderbilt looking really good. And Missouri's resume is also looking pretty good. Iowa State at number 19, a tough loss to Texas Tech, 23-22. The Cyclones, the second team to go down undefeated this weekend. This Iowa State team was sitting right there at second place in the Big 12. They still are. I mean, they could still make it to the Big 12 championship, but they got, a schedule, they could probably slip up again. Basically, after a team loses their first game of the season, they just don't seem to repeat that loss. And, Iowa State probably could slip up somewhere. Now, you look at the game against Kansas State. That probably is a game that still can decide who gets to the Big 12 championship, because if you think about it, if Kansas State beats Iowa State in the head-to-head, they're going to get in there regardless, of the head-to-head. So, yeah, Kansas State and Iowa State both here at 18 and 19. Tough loss for both of these teams. Kansas State, though, lost to a pretty average Houston team. They were 3-5 going into that game. The Cougars were, and they went out there and they beat Kansas State, so pulling off the upset there. I knew Kansas State, Iowa State and BYU were going to probably slip up somewhere. BYU did not even play this past weekend, but I knew the Cyclones were going to probably slip up somewhere, and they did that, of course, this past weekend. And then Kansas State, boy, what a very tough loss for them, but they got the loss to BYU. They lost that game like 38-9 back in the month of September, but Kansas State, they have a better resume than Iowa State here, so that's the reason why you're seeing the Wildcats here at number 18. Washington State also had a bye week, so not much to talk about the Cougars. Washington State sitting there with one loss coming to the team ahead of them, and that's Boise State. Boise State has the win over Washington State, and then they have that close loss to the number 1 ranked team in the country in the Ducks of Oregon. So both Washington State and Boise State have pretty good resumes, and they are at number 16 and number 17 in my rankings for this week. And these are my rankings here from 16 through 20. All right, 11 through 15 now. This is where I had a really tough time, putting teams at. LSU at number 15, Texas A&M at number 14, Clemson at 13, Indiana at 12, and then SMU at number 11. So LSU had a bye week, so not much to talk about them, but they'll get ready for their big test coming up against Alabama. They'll get that game, of course, at home. and that probably will be a night game in Death Valley, one of the toughest places to play at night, especially in the SEC Conference. Yeah, LSU's got a pretty good chance to win that game. You look at LSU's resume, they had the loss, to Texas A&M, which is just ahead of them, and then they got the win over Ole Miss. But they had that bad loss to USC, which is not looking like a really good loss now for LSU. But LSU is still in the top 15 for me, and then Texas A&M at number 14. I didn't know what to do with Texas A&M. Look, let's be honest. They did lose to South Carolina 44-20, so not a great performance here from the Aggies, but I got to keep Texas A&M ahead of LSU. I can't just drop them out of the top 15 and behind LSU. And Texas A&M, has a better record than LSU. And also the Tigers had a bye week, so I really don't want to put a bye team that had a bye week ahead of a Texas A&M team that just lost to a South Carolina team. Because if you look at South Carolina's record, they're pretty solid. So that's a solid loss for Texas A&M. But yeah, the Aggies, they still have a better resume than LSU. You got the win over this LSU team. Then you got the win over Missouri. And then you also got the loss to Notre Dame. So Texas A&M still has a pretty good resume. So I didn't drop Texas A&M any spots this week. Again, I didn't know really what to do with them. So I got them still here at number 14, just like last week. And then Clemson here at number 13. Clemson, tough loss for them to Louisville. Boy, the offense just really struggled in this game. This was kind of the first kind of real tough test that Clemson's had probably since the Georgia game, because if you think about their other games, they've been pretty explosive on offense, but defensively they had a pretty tough time against Virginia a couple weeks ago, but they had a really tough time stopping this offense of Louisville. So yeah, Clemson does drop for me outside the top 10. They were ranked at like number 7 for me, I believe, last week. So yeah, Clemson, tough loss for them. I still think they're alive in the ACC championship race. They had to see SMU or Miami kind of slip up somewhere, and I think Clemson probably gets in. They'll have Pittsburgh coming up this weekend, and that game, of course, will be on the road. Can Clemson bounce back after the loss to Louisville? I mean, it's going to be really hard to tell, but Clemson here at number 13, Indiana at number 12. They're still undefeated. They improved to 9-0 here on the season. And I know Indiana doesn't have a great resume out of these other teams here, especially like Clemson, Texas A&M, and LSU. And I forgot to mention, the only reason why Clemson is still in the top 15, what's keeping them here in the top 25, is because of their loss to Georgia. Now Indiana back to them. They had a slow start against Michigan State. We're down like 10-0, and then of course from the end of the day they just kept pulling away, and this offense just continued to score and score. And that's the reason why Indiana is ahead of these other teams, because they've been pretty solid. They've been one of the most dominant teams in the country. They might be the best offense in the country, and then defensively they're just going to get better and better. Indiana's got Michigan this weekend. That'll be a very tough test here for this Indiana team. I know Michigan hasn't had a really good season, but this might be a tough defense that they'll go up against. And then they got Ohio State coming up in a couple more weeks, and I believe that game is on November 23rd. So an undefeated Indiana team could be a one-loss team against Ohio State. That could be very interesting, but we'll see what Indiana looks like against Michigan. The good news is they'll get that game at home. And then SMU here at number 11. SMU, very dominant win against Pittsburgh. Was very impressed with both sides of the football for the Mustangs. You look at SMU's resume. They got wins over Louisville, which that Louisville game's looking like a really good win for SMU, and then they got the one loss to BYU. That's looking like a really good loss still for the Mustangs. So yeah, SMU here at number 11, a pretty good resume for them, and these are my rankings here from 11 through 15. All right, 6 through 10 now. I got Alabama at number 10, BYU at number 9, Notre Dame at number 8, Penn State at 7, and then Tennessee here at 6. So we'll start with Alabama, BYU, and Notre Dame. All these teams had bye weeks this past weekend, so we can't really talk about them that much. Alabama will get ready for LSU. Of course, that game, going to be in Death Valley. I think this is a game that probably decides who probably will be still as an at-large contender. Alabama and LSU are both two-loss teams in the SEC. They've lost a couple of conference games. But, Alabama and LSU are pretty even teams, to be honest. As of right now, I'd probably take LSU in this matchup because they're playing at home. Because we've seen Alabama struggle on the road this year. The offense just seems like they can't get things going where they used to be. But, yeah, we'll see what Alabama does here against LSU this weekend and see if they can get back on track after the couple losses to Vanderbilt and then Tennessee. But, Alabama, they got the win over Missouri. That's a pretty good loss on their resume, and then you got the loss to Vanderbilt, which is really solid for them, and then the loss to Tennessee is looking pretty good for them as well. So Alabama here at number 10. BYU also had a bye week. We'll see what they look like as they go into their first matchup here in the month of November. I think BYU is going to slip up somewhere, to be honest, because the Big 12, I feel like nobody can go undefeated just based off of what happened to Iowa State. But you never know. BYU keeps proving people wrong, and they've done that, of course, throughout the season. Notre Dame at number 8. Notre Dame has a win over Texas A&M. They also have the win over Louisville, which is looking pretty better now. And Notre Dame's also got the, that's just a pretty good resume. So, yeah, the Fighting Irish here at number 8. That Navy game is not looking like a really good win for them because Navy just lost like 2 games in a row. But yeah, Notre Dame here at number 8, they're looking like a top 10 team in my opinion. And then Penn State at number 7. So Penn State does drop for me outside the top 5 and right here into the, just inside the top 10. Penn State, though, very tough loss for them against Ohio State. They had so many opportunities to pull off a huge win here, but, the offense just continued to struggle, pretty much throughout the entire game, especially in the second half. It seemed like Penn State had a chance to tie this game up. They went with their best player in Tyler Warren, that number 44 player. And yeah, if Penn State probably would have, given him the football a little bit more, Penn State might have had a chance to dominate this game, but that didn't really happen. Penn State, down the field, they went for, like 3 runs in a row on first down, second down, and third down. I don't understand that calling there from the coaching staff. Penn State should have probably ran a play action pass. They did end up passing it on 4th and goal. But yeah, Penn State, they just made so many mistakes in this game. It's not really about the offense and defense. The defense did their job, but, the offense just really didn't contribute. So, yeah, Penn State here at number 7, and I don't really understand why the coaching staff would run it 3 times with one of their running backs instead of going with Tyler Warren. So, yeah, Penn State here at number 7, and Tennessee at number 6. Volunteers get a win over their rival Kentucky this past weekend, 28-18. Tennessee did not play pretty well in the first half. The difference for Tennessee this year, again, first half of the season, it seemed like they were one of the best offenses in the country. And then second half of the year, they just can't seem to contribute on the offensive side of the football. But when Tennessee gets off to slow starts, they seem like they play well in the second half, and that kind of reminds me of the Butch Jones era, even though this is the Josh Heupel era. Tennessee is a second-half team. They've been proving that this year. They did it against Alabama, they did it against Florida, and they do it here against Kentucky. And what really made the difference was, of course, the running game for Tennessee. So Tennessee, they barely survive against Kentucky. They'll play Mississippi State this weekend, and then they'll get ready for Georgia and Athens coming up in a couple weeks. So these are my rankings here now from 6 through 10. All right, let's go to the top 5 now. We got Miami at number 5. Talked about them earlier in my top 5. Texas at number 4. Ohio State at number 3. Georgia at number 2. And then Oregon at number 1. So Miami jumps into the top 5 just because, Penn State did lose over the weekend. Look, I know Miami doesn't have a great resume, but, that Louisville game is looking like a pretty solid win now. You got Miami also, we talk about their game this past weekend against the Duke Blue Devils. Boy, they started off pretty slow. They were down at the half, 21-17, but like what Miami's done all year long, they're a second-half team, just like Tennessee. Cam Ward just refuses to let his team lose, and that's been the thing about Miami this year. It seems like, it takes some time to really get things going, and then on the offensive side of the football in the second half, they just are very explosive and very tough to stop. And Cam Ward, in my opinion, is still one of the best quarterbacks in the country. So the Hurricanes here jump into the top 5 for me for the first time all season long. And they're sitting here at number 5 in these rankings. And then Texas here at number 4 had a bye week. Texas will be back in action against Florida this weekend after losing to Georgia a couple weeks ago. Or I should say they beat Vanderbilt a couple weeks ago. They were really lucky to escape in that game, but their one loss, of course, coming to Georgia. That's a really good resume loss there. And then Ohio State at number 3. Beat Penn State on the road 20-13. Ohio State's running game was one thing I was really impressed with in this game, especially in the second half. Quayshawn Junkins, Will Howard, and Travion Henderson kind of made some explosive runs there. And then Ohio State, of course, just ran out the clock and won this game. And I was really impressed with their defense as well. So, yeah, this Ohio State team looks a lot different compared to the early part of the season. It just really takes a lot of time for the Buckeyes to kind of figure things out. But Ohio State here at number 3. And then Georgia at number 2. Boy, Georgia really struggled against Florida, especially on the offensive side of football from this past weekend. How about this? Carson Beck throwing 3 interceptions again. I believe that's like the third game that he's done that this year, throwing 3 picks or more. So yeah, Georgia's kind of struggling the offense, but their defense kind of made the difference in this game. If DJ Lagway did not get hurt for Florida, I feel like Florida might have had a chance here to win this game. I still think Georgia probably would have won, but defensively, Georgia continues to be that really good defensive team. It's just that the offense has to get things going, and they're going to have a tough test this week against Ole Miss on the road. If Carson Beck doesn't stay consistent here for Georgia, then Georgia might go down this weekend for the second time with their second loss. So Georgia, they still have a pretty tough schedule the rest of the way. They got Ole Miss this weekend, Tennessee still left to play, and then I believe you got a non-conference game, and then you got Georgia Tech, which I think could be a little bit of a challenge, but not really a big challenge. But Georgia here at number 2, and then Oregon here at the top at number 1. They're still undefeated at 9-0, beat Michigan on the road this past Saturday. I was really impressed with Dylan Gabriel's performance, and then, of course, the offense just continues to succeed, and then the defense as well. I mean, this Oregon team has come a long way ever since flat performances in the first 2 weeks. They have come a long way ever since those 2 games, and they continue to be really successful on both sides of the football, and they are definitely the best team in the country. And you look at their resume, they have wins over Ohio State, they have a win over Illinois, which is not really a big win for them, but they also got the, win over Boise State. So they are, in my opinion, going to be probably ranked number 1 tomorrow, unless the committee probably pulls out maybe something unexpected. But I think Oregon definitely should be number 1 in the playoff rankings. Ohio State and Georgia are pretty close, but I think those 2 teams are pretty even. Maybe they go with Georgia just because Georgia has a win over Clemson, and then they also have the win over, they have the loss to Alabama and everything. So we'll see what those playoff rankings look like tomorrow. But these are my updated top 25 rankings as we head into week 11 of this 2024 college football season. So let me guys know what you think about my top 25. What do you think the playoff rankings are going to look like tomorrow night? Let me know down in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.